So as I mentioned at the beginning, my homily has 4 parts today, and they don't necessarily follow logically. And I base them on the 3 readings, and then the 4th part will be an action. So this is the second part. The first part was about the first reading from Elijah. You remember that. This is the second part about the Ephesians, and it's about anger. Did you catch all that? Put away from you all bitterness and wrath, anger, wrangling, slander, together with all malice. Be kind to one another, tender-hearted, forgiving one another, as God in Christ has forgiven you. And I've said before that one thing that seems going on in our society is the increase in anger. Doesn't it seem like so many people are right on the edge, and the least little thing will trip them? And so we certainly need to think about that and talk about that. Now, there's 2 kinds of anger. First of all, there is the anger because of what others do or don't do. We all think that everybody else should live by our rules, because inside of all of us, there's a little rule maker. And that little rule maker makes rules for me and for all of you. And when you don't do what my rule maker says, sometimes I get angry. I've talked about this before, but Dr. Dale Olin years ago wrote this booklet on anger. And we have extra copies. If you want one, contact the office. It's out of print, so I took the liberty of making copies, because this is the best little 64 pages, big print. It's the best little book I ever found, because it doesn't talk about what to do with your anger after you get it. It talks about how not to get it in the first place. So if you get angry because of some idiot driving ahead of you, either doesn't do what you think they should do or they cut you off, don't expect them to live by your rules. Let it go. Or others do things that you don't like because they're not following your rules. Remember, your lawmaker doesn't make rules for anybody but you. That's the first kind of anger. The second anger is a little bit more difficult, and that's the anger that happens when somebody attacks you or says something critical about you or to you. That was the first reading, Elijah. We all surround ourselves with yes people. We like people around us to tell us how wonderful we are. I hope that all of us have somebody in our life who will tell the truth, because sometimes it hurts. Now, sometimes it's justified, and sometimes I say people will attack us for whatever reason. Sometimes people leaving Mass will attack me because of something I said or didn't say. But it's usually a one-line zinger, and they're out the door. They're not willing to stick around and talk about it. And that's tough. It's tough for me, and I bet it's tough for all of us. But it's at those times when we are unnecessarily attacked, or we feel attacked, that anger rises up, and many times we want to respond in like kind. Somebody says something nasty to us, we want to attack back. And the rule of thumb is never say anything or never do anything when you're angry. If only we could remember that. Never say anything and never do anything while we're angry. Work through that first and then say and do things. And I bet we've all done the opposite, where we have said something in back and it has destroyed relationships or injured relationships. That's what the letter to Ephesians is talking about. Part 3, the gospel. 6th chapter of John's gospel. It's on the Eucharist. Long chapter. Please read it, because I'm proposing that John, the writer, is taking the teachings of Jesus and trying to draw us down deeper and deeper into the meaning of the Eucharist. Level 1 was 2 weeks ago, and that was physical hunger. That's the multiplication of loaves and fishes. Remember that? Jesus wants to solve our physical hunger, our need for food and drink and water and shelter and clothing. That's kind of the surface. Last week, level 2, as I think it is, John and Jesus brings us down to another level, and that's the need for meaning. Because once we have enough food and shelter and clothing and so on, then we start to think about, what does my life mean? What's the meaning of my life? Why am I here? What am I doing? I'm not getting anywhere. Now today, what I think is level 3. Now there might, as you read the chapter, you might have other levels. Go for it. Level 3 that I'm at today, Jesus says, I'm the bread of life. I have come down from heaven. So Jesus is subtly revealing that he's the presence of God. So as I said at the beginning, the question that I have today is, why do we seek Jesus? Why do we seek Jesus? Think about it. Because human nature being what it is, usually we seek Jesus for what we can get out of it. And again, I'm not complaining, because that's human nature. Why do we seek Jesus? Is it not for what Jesus can do for us? What can I get out of this? Don't you think about that in your prayer life? You say to God in prayer, well, I go to Mass every Sunday and I give to the poor. Now, what can you do for me? But Jesus is inviting us to a deeper level, not to seek him for what he can do for us, but what we can do for him. In our prayer, do we ever pray, God, what can I do for you? Show me how I can change to be more like Christ. And you all know this. Jesus isn't in the world anymore, but he's chosen us to be his presence, to show his unselfish love. And the love of Christ is always a love that's self-sacrificial. How can I change to be a greater example of the presence of Christ? That's the challenge. Because most of the time we say, I can't do it, or it's not my problem. I read an article this week of a now deceased Jewish rabbi who talks about our culture. And he says that we as Americans, we have moved from a we society to an I society. I'm free to be whatever I choose. The bad news is that leaves us vulnerable and alone. The good news is that we can turn it around and become again a we society. We have lots of problems on our planet. The Delta strain of the COVID virus is raging among the unvaccinated and threatening the health of every one of us. But no one can make me get the vaccine I don't want or force me to wear a mask. Sorry about those who have gotten sick and have died, but my personal liberty comes first. Think about the problems of the planet. The poor, the crisis of refugees and immigrants, the desperation of family without health insurance, global warming, the buildup of nuclear bombs. Too bad. I have my own family to worry about, and they come first. We all have our opinions about those things. But if we're honest, our opinions usually based upon what's best for me. I don't have all the answers. But do you ever pray about those problems and then ask God to show you what God thinks about them? And then the ability to change so that we would reflect those values. That's what it means to follow a true prophet. Otherwise, we're just following ourselves, and most of the time we are false prophets. Part 4 now, if technology works, I'd like to show you all this in action with our last week's Vacation Bible Camp.
There's a spirit I cannot contain. There's a spirit I cannot contain. The same power that raised Jesus up from the grave. The same spirit I cannot contain. Everywhere I go on this road, high and low, where I go with you. So I won't be afraid, this my hope, come what may. Where I go with you. Where I go with you. Where I go with you. Breath upon these bones, your fire in my soul, your kingdom is my home, and I don't walk alone.